Is waiting for you will prove untrue. Then what will you do? Maybe you'll sit and decide, wishing that I were near. Then maybe you'll ask me to come back again, and maybe I'll say maybe.
As most of you probably know, a while ago the official Fallout Twitter confirmed that in partnership with Amazon Studios, Kilter Films and the creators of Westworld, a Fallout TV show is being put into development. I've been somewhat vocal on this channel in the past about why I think video games do indeed have great potential to be adapted well into more conventional storytelling mediums, such as film and television. And the Fallout IP, as well as being a franchise that I really like, has tremendous potential for an adaptation for the big and small screen. We've been given almost nothing to go off of, in terms of what this series will be, aside from the brief teaser which really didn't tell us much. The show could be a story set in the Fallout universe, an adaptation of the story of one of the games, or even a reimagining of the IP, God forbid. For me personally, I've been thinking about the prospect of a Fallout TV show for a while now, so I figured it would be fun for me to go through all the elements of the show that I think are important, and say what I want or what I would do. The beauty of the universe of Fallout is that it really isn't restricted by one static genre. Fallout is so much more than yet another post-apocalyptic piece of entertainment. Its setting creates what I believe is the most diverse world in fiction for storytelling potential. Fallout's post-nuclear setting, of course, is open to telling a story that heavily focuses on that aspect. The series could be following a survivor of the Great War scrounging for food and salvage to live another day, whilst avoiding conflict from other factions in what remains of the old world. The game's implementation of the retro-futurism of the 1950s has also given birth to dozens of wacky sci-fi concepts that the writers could play around with. They're working in a world populated with mutants, 200-year-old zombies, androids, robots, irradiated monstrosities, and weird and zany things of science fiction such as cloning, telepathy, transference of consciousness, lasers, mech suits, and sentient brains in jars. They're all commonplace in the world. Going with a sci-fi element could definitely create some interesting results. Personally, however, I would love to see the show play into the Western element of the Fallout IP. Fallout's post-apocalyptic backdrop essentially makes the setting the Wild West, a lawless frontier full of scoundrels, bandits, bounty hunters, and deception, where one wrong turn could get you shot in the head. Fallout New Vegas played into this element to great effect, with the result of creating a creative spin on the typical Western trope of revenge, and as stated earlier, the sci-fi elements makes this idea even more fun. There's also several other genres they could go for given what we have in Fallout's universe, though it's not enough for the entire series to adopt for a full season while still staying true to the Fallout license, in my opinion. A possibility could be that the show goes for an anthology type of format, with each episode being a different character story, taking place in a different location in the wasteland, each with a different type of tone. As I said before, Fallout is an incredibly versatile universe, and pretty much every type of character or tone has been seen at one point or another. One episode could be a noir type of story, as we've already seen a noir tone through characters such as Nick Valentine. We could have a heist story like what we saw in the events of Dead Money. There could be an episode revolving around crime, as we've been introduced to several mob bosses throughout the series at various points. Gizmo, the Mordino crime family, the Muertas, and that one fat guy from Fallout 4. Point is, there's so much you can do for genre for this show. Fallout has never limited itself to its simple sounding premise of a world destroyed by nuclear war. Instead, it has embraced it and explored its potential for as many types of stories as possible. Every Fallout game is neither character driven or plot driven. Instead, it's driven by the setting of whenever the game is set. The world itself is a character, which is more often than not the driving force of the plot. New Vegas and Hoover Dam and the Mojave is the driving force for the plot. Every character wants both of those locations, and the entire ending is revolved around who will gain control of the region and what that victory means for the rest of the Mojave. So the location is very important to everything the show will be attempting, as for every Fallout game, the setting has been what the story has been built around. When making a Fallout series, the location cannot be an afterthought. So where should it be set? I know nothing about American geography, but I am fairly knowledgeable of Fallout's world. Setting the show in the NCR again could be cool to see. The area has so much rich lore surrounding it and is where the Fallout games had started, so it could be a good place to introduce the audience to some of the basic post-war lore of the Fallout universe. Like the NCR, the Master Super Mutants, the Brotherhood of Steel, Ghoulification, the Vault Dweller, all that fun stuff. And we haven't properly seen the area realised outside of the limited amount of what we saw in Fallout 1 and 2, which could create an interesting locale for the show. However, I doubt the show will go this route, as from what we know, the NCR is far too developed and civilized to be an appropriate place to introduce newcomers to the series of Fallout's broken, depraved and desolate world. But it's just a thought. Utah would be a cool area to set the story in, as they have a lot of neat lore to go off of from the Van Buren design document, and it would allow the writers to reuse classic Fallout factions like the NCR, Brotherhood of Steel, and Caesar's Legion. New Orleans has been a place a lot of Fallout fans want to see. Really, I don't care where they choose to set it, so long as it's a place Fallout fans aren't overly familiar with. I want something new from this series, and I don't want them to alienate audiences new to Fallout with weird fan service that comes with setting the show somewhere like the Capital Wasteland or New Vegas. Before the announcement of this show, I was working on a review with the Fallout web series Nuka Break, and one of the points I brought up fairly often was how I don't think that Fallout feels like Fallout when experienced through the eyes of an actual character. The main character could be the most well-done, three-dimensional character on planet Earth, but the creators do that, then I can't help but feel like they're missing the point. The things people renown in the Fallout series for in its narrative are never really its portrayal of characters, though it does have some great ones in relation to the best Fallout game. People fell in love with its story because of its world filled with locations that became instantly familiar, factions that have an ideology that you're constantly thinking about, and choices to make that have good and bad consequences. Obviously, the games work this way because they have an emphasis on role-playing and want the player to project themselves onto the character. The reason why most of the games take place from the perspective of a Vault Dweller is because, like the player, the world is unfamiliar to them. Exposition can be delivered naturally and you discover things at the same rate as your character. In order for the show to succeed as an adaptation of the series, they need to adapt this element and make it work in the context of a show, because this aspect is vital to Fallout's identity and success. Obviously, I don't want the show's main character to have no character. There is of course a vast difference in storytelling between TV and video games. The fact that you don't play a character in the games is fine, because you are the character, dictating what they say, do, how they act, their past, their morals, their drives, things that make a character a character. What I propose is that the show gives its main protagonist a somewhat reserved character, one that definitely has a personality, morals and abilities that people can get attached to, but not enough to the point where he overshadows the world being presented to us. Examples of what I mean would be characters like Mad Max, the Mandalorian and the Man of No Name from the Dollars trilogy. All three of these characters are fairly defined. Mad Max was a cop who had devoted his life to law and order, but now is forced to survive in a world where there is no law and order. The Mandalorian is an honor-bound warrior who is devoted to his values and has a deep connection with those he feels close to. The Man with No Name is a gruff bounty hunter who will do wrong for money but ultimately has a heart of gold. They have character, but ultimately are just the window through which we experience the world. And unless the show decides to go the route of an anthology series, then I think it needs to stick to this. Because when they don't, it's weird.
Who has time to learn how to draw?
Twig.
I mean, we're in a world full of mutants and robots and people killing each other over caps. And this guy learns
This is something that I want the creators to just do their own thing with. As I stated earlier, I really don't want a straight up remake of the plot of one of the other games. Not because we've already seen them necessarily, but because I don't want a series of such potential to rely on old shit. That would really only appeal to fans of the franchise. On top of that, the game's stories only really work as games, and an attempted translation of them to television would be clumsy. That's not to say that it couldn't be done well, it could even improve some things, but me personally, I really want them to just do their own thing. Make something new and make it a story to be remembered. No matter what, I just don't want it to be known as that one Fallout show. I really don't want this show to be Fallout porn. I don't want to be constantly subjected to fan service and moments that make me go, oh, I know that. But that brings up an interesting conversation of what could be considered pointless fan service and what is a mechanic of the universe. I would posit that the over-inclusion of the Brotherhood of Steel in the story would be fan service, as they are repeatedly shoved into things where they don't fit only because they're one of the most iconic staples of the Fallout franchise, despite their appearance in the story being contradictory to the lore. Same applies with the Super Mutants. Every appearance they've made past Fallout 2, and with the exception of New Vegas, didn't make much sense. However, the argument could be made that they are just a natural part of the universe. The Brotherhood has been established to carry out expeditions in every corner of the wasteland, and you could probably stretch some of the lore to allow for super mutants to be included. But include them because they are something that can be put into the show naturally. I really don't want fan service that can only cater to fans of the games, and I most definitely don't want it to appeal to gamers. Ew. I don't want stupid fucking fourth wall breaks about stuff in the games that make no sense in a real world context. How come I can put all these weapons on my wrist? That's not how it works in real life.
Wow! That's certainly unrealistic! There's no way that would happen in real life! Am I right? Oh, what a humorous observation I have made! Quite the gaffy, I must say!
Basically, I don't want the show to pander by including unnecessary elements of the Fallout universe or by trying to appeal to the abhorrent sense of humour possessed by the type of chimp brains that own a copy of the official Fallout colouring book. Another thing I want this show to do is to use its setting to actually say something. Tim Kaine, the creator of Fallout, once said, "My idea is to explore more of the world and more of the ethics of a post-nuclear world, not make a better plasma gun." Fallout is more than just another generic piece of apocalyptic fiction. Once you get past the fisting sex robots and giant radioactive bugs.
Yes, sir. Vestal reporting for duty. Please assume the position.
Fallout is one of the most thought-provoking video game series and shows the kind of sophistication video games are capable of. Fallout isn't about the end of the world, it's about the aftermath and how mankind is forced to change. What kind of faction will end up on top? What kind of attitude should this new society have? What is required for survival above all else? Questions about philosophy and ideals is what makes Fallout Fallout. Caesar's Legion aren't just wasteland Romans. They're the antithesis to groups such as the NCR, which dedicates itself to trying to recapture the values of the old world and democracy. Caesar's Legion, in comparison, is a nationalist, imperialist, totalitarian, homogenous culture that conquers less developed tribes and integrates them into the Legion as slaves to the Legion's goals, to Caesar's goals. Little more than pawns that have no value other than what they bring to the state, lacking any free will or agency. The NCR, conversely, prides itself on being a democratic state which has different states and leaders contribute towards the NCR's expansion. The downside to this is the inevitable infighting and consolidation of power within their government, which makes the NCR a more unstable nation, which is one of the things that led to the destruction of the old world. Caesar doesn't have this problem, and at the end of the day, the Legion being a dictatorship ensures that if the world comes under the command of the Legion, the Great War will never repeat itself. There's a case for both factions. As wrong as the Legion is, Caesar is ultimately right. Under his rule, another event like the Great War will never come to pass. But that will come at the expense of basic rights for many of its citizens, especially women, and is morality worth throwing away for the sake of survival? The NCR has its problems, but it has the capability to learn from the past and be better for the future, whilst carving out a new path for the people of the Wasteland and promoting more progressive ideals of democracy and equality. Or are the two just as bad as each other? Both absorb smaller, less developed communities to try and expand their own goals, and whilst the NCR may promote democracy and the freedom of the individual, they are shown to view its citizens with a level of apathy, only really caring about them on the basis of what they can provide the NCR, which is not very different from Caesar. Should either power be in control, or should the Wasteland's fate be left up to a new power free of bias? I made that little mini essay on the NCR and Legion in Fallout New Vegas to prove how much you can say with the Fallout IP. I want the show to have this kind of level of depth, not restrict itself to simple good faction, bad faction type of narrative depth like we've seen in Fallout 3 and 4, which is something that has me worried. Todd Howard is attached to the series as an executive producer, and he was behind Fallout 3, 4 and 76, all of which had serviceable to bad stories. Depending on how involved Todd Howard is in this series will be indicative of its quality in my opinion.
Who's laughing now?
I have a lot of faith in the potential of this show, and I hope that the show goes for the kind of things I've advocated for in this video. But really, I just want something that tries to distinguish itself in some way, while still staying true to the spirit and idea of Fallout, and not simply the aesthetic. Fallout's retro-futuristic 1950s vision of the future and soundtrack is dressing, and not what the series should be focused around. I want this show to explore the ethics of a post-apocalyptic world, not a new type of plasma gun.